Hello and welcome to another Fintech Founder Fireside. In this episode, I'm talking to Daniel Cannizzaro, founder and CEO at Parpera. He and his team are currently in the build phase of their fintech product journey, building a digital solution for Australian SMEs. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Jazz, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
So before we get into some more detail about the build and some of the other phases, for anyone who doesn't know you, can you intro yourself? We worked together on a previous phase or early build, but for anyone who doesn't know you, anyone who's not come across Parpera yet, intro yourself and what Parpera is about, who it's for. Yeah.
Sure, thank you, and great to reconnect, Jazz. So I'm Daniel Cannizzaro, the founder and CEO of Parpera. Parpera stands for Fair Wallet. It's a translation of the Latin words for fair wallet, and it effectively represents our purpose, which is we're building an ecosystem of fair and transparent products that will help business owners set up, manage, and grow their businesses in the new economy. And we felt that as part of that, it would be really important to start with the banking layer, which is the point at which businesses and business owners specifically receive money and then help people better receive money and then make better decisions around that money. And that includes better understanding their cash flow, better allocating money to different budgets and provisions, and then making better decisions around how they spend it through the allocation or nudging towards products and services that can help people build and grow their business. As I mentioned, phase one of our ambition is to build a platform that is effectively a fintech for SMEs. We're targeting freelancers, sole traders, and entrepreneurs as part of our first release. We were founded in April 2020, and you and I crossed paths in around September, October last year when we were going through our design phase. Design then went into build fairly quickly, and really a real pleasure to be back talking to you today to share our lessons from the build phase.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, good to speak to you too. So you've just touched on design. So it'd be good to, before we dive into some of those build questions, a brief background on what discovering design looked for you, and like what was key from those phases, and what did you learn, and what were some of those challenges?
Yeah, so for me and for our team, it was really important that in designing the proposition, community was core to the reason why Parpera exists, and we wanted to build it with the community in mind, and to ensure that what we were building was solving a real problem. And as part of that, what we did was we took a jobs to be done approach to defining the end customer problem, and we effectively interviewed and surveyed hundreds of businesses to understand what is really the issue when it comes to managing business money. And there were three key problem statements or jobs to be done that came out of that. One was help me receive money simply and quickly from my customers. The second was around help me maintain my cash flow and better understand my expenses and tax reporting obligations. And the third was around help me gain access to personalized support, products and services tailored to my needs. And those three problem statements effectively then informed our decisions around product features and then a product roadmap as well. As an extension to our desire to build with the community, we equity crowdfunded last year. So we have around 336 investors. We raised 1.16 million last year. 1 million of that came from equity crowdfunding. And then we've interviewed and surveyed a whole host of businesses locally and internationally to understand their problems. We've then raised funds from the community, including business owners. And then we've gone and had co-design sessions where we included business owners as well to say, okay, well, this is what we did through our qualitative analysis and quantified it as well. Now we want to reconfirm this through a number of co-design sessions. So in the latter half of last year, we had Zoom and Miro sessions where we invited people to participate and refine the features we bring to market. And then in February this year, we launched a closed MVP. So we effectively took what we learned from interviewing and all the discussions we had with people around the proposition. We built a very light MVP. We engaged in your help as well around prioritizing that late last year. And then in February this year, released effectively a wallet and card offering for people to use. It was a closed group of 50 users that we've had on that platform. And we've effectively just been testing out what's important to business owners and what are the key features and what we came to learn from that. So design then transitioned into build. It's not, as everyone knows, and as you would know specifically, it's not a traditional lifecycle approach. We've sort of got analyze, design, build, test, deploy. It's very much iterative and agile, not to overuse that term. And from that, we've been able to learn where do we prioritize our efforts during build as well. And a great example is the three big things that came out of our discussions through design and then reconfirmed during build was the importance of categorization specific to businesses. So not labeling a transaction that happened at a coffee shop as food or drink, but instead being able to label that as meeting with client or for example, sustenance of some sort. Secondly, it's around invoicing. So invoicing was a really big feature that came out of our discussions with people that we spoke to. We always planned to do it, but it actually became a higher priority as a result of how often it came up. And the third one was around international payments. So that's still expensive and difficult for businesses in Australia as well.
Great. So just to dive into one of those things that you mentioned, the co-design sessions, because I'm always really interested in those direct learnings and how changes to prioritization happens based off community feedback. So was there anything out of those co-design sessions that was either just purely validated what you were doing, or was like, oh, we should have a rethink about this because our core customer base doesn't quite get how this looks and feels, and we should pivot some stuff around?
Yeah, so I mentioned invoicing as something that came up as quite early on as something that was quite an urgent need that people wanted solved. So at the moment, around 50% of the businesses, we surveyed 500 businesses, around 50% of them told us they still did invoicing using spreadsheets, Word documents, emails, and it was a patchwork of tools that they used, and it was an absolute mess. And it still is today. And so when we went through the process of designing the product, we then tested that back into the co-design sessions. And so invoicing is one part of the journey of receiving money, but the other part is getting the money into your account so then you can do things with it. And if we go down to a deeper level around product feature sort of trade-offs, we could prioritize real-time payments or access to real-time payments. We could prioritize, in Australia, we've got the UK's equivalent of faster payments is the MPP platform. And that's effectively to provide you real-time direct entry payments, so BSB account number payments to bank. We could prioritize that, or we could prioritize digital card in wallet and other payment features. And what we came to realize is that actually the number one priority for a business is to receive cash. It's not necessarily to make payments. And so that helped restructure how we thought around the end-to-end flow. So it wasn't just we needed to create a really simple, easy-to-use invoicing tool to receive payments, but actually we needed to focus on how do we get that money into the account quickly, and then how do we allow them to chase up on outstanding invoices and to manage all that within the app. And it helped us deprioritize the features around paying out money and actually focusing more around how do we receive money quicker, and then what are the tools that we can use that we can build in around insights as well to help people better understand and make decisions around that money. And so I'm not sure if that's addressing the question specifically. That came out of sort of indirectly through those discussions in co-design sessions, in sort of reading through what people were telling us and understanding, well, actually the problem is at the moment is that invoicing and the account is disjointed, and then what you do with that money is disjointed as well. So how do we bring it together in a seamless experience?
Yeah, no, I think it does. It definitely answers the question. I mean, I think sometimes it's, once you're in that discovery and design, and you're like free flowing, you've got loads of ideas for stuff, and then sometimes it's good to get put in check by your own community. Go back to them. Okay, this is what we're thinking about building, and they're like, yeah, but I invoice, and then there's 5 days before there's probably even an acknowledgement of that invoice being received by the other person. Then there might be another 5-10 days of actually receiving the cash. So actually the real problem is I invoice, and then 15 days later I get the money in my account, but I need that money as soon as it's invoiced. I want that money in my account. Like that's the reality.
And you can start to think about sort of other applications that you could or other features that you could embed in that flow to kind of speed up that process to payment. One of the interesting things as well around this proposition, so what Parpera is in Australia is we are effectively building something that does exist in other markets, but we can use what's happened in other markets as a foundation for what we build, and then we can look to innovate and improve on top of that offering. So what we learned is that building a fintech for businesses is very different to building a fintech for consumers. And so, and what I mean by that is that in a consumer proposition, as mentioned before, the ability to have it's got a table stakes that be able to have your card in a digital format in Apple Pay, Google Pay, the ability to make payments quickly via those channels. But what we found was, again, through serving businesses, actually there were a different sort of prioritization of features, and they center more around receiving money rather than paying money.
Yeah, that makes sense. So getting into the build in earnest now, I know you guys have been building for at least a few months now. But what does that mean for you? What does it look like? In addition to, hammering out lines of code and stringing the app together and getting it onto a phone.
Yeah, so there's always that trade-off between building something that's of high quality within your cost and resource constraints, and balancing that with your ambitions to get something that's lovable and awesome to market. And for us, what that meant is really breaking down the product into discrete phases. So phase one is what we called pre-alpha, and you and I did some work together around that late last year, which was just being able to first of all show a balance in the app go from 0 to another number, and being able to facilitate money in and money out, and that was tick one. And so we achieved that in sometime in January. And then the next point was, okay, now that we can prove to ourselves that we can get money in and out of the app or in our platform securely, then the next step is, well, let's start building other value-added features around that. So we then, through a payments company that we engaged through our MVP, utilized a prepaid card and attached it to a bank account, and effectively were able to build out our insights and start to refine those. And so we were able to show in late February, we were able to show sort of categories, transactions by category, transactions by merchant, and then the usual transaction feed by date and time, and then overlay different customized time intervals on that as well to enhance the data. The next part around that is, okay, well, now that we've got that working and we're starting to get some feedback from our early members on that as well, what else can we go to? And that's when we started to move towards invoicing and really starting to use that flow. Through the build, again, it's this trade-off. So we have a core team of 4. There were 2 of us pre-Christmas, another 2 joined in January, so it was myself and the CTO pre-Christmas, then our product lead and front-end engineer joined in January, and then we've augmented the team as well with 3 offshore resources, which are working closely with us. And there's a lot to get through in terms of building something that day one needs to be as good as what's available in market. So it's not 2015. So we are in a market where people have higher expectations, particularly in Australia. It's quite a mature market. And so people have quite a good level of service quality in the consumer part of their financial services interactions. However, there's a really big lag in the services available to people not only from a banking perspective, but from the day-to-day management of your money as a business. And so we have an opportunity there, but whatever we release to market needs to be at least as good as what they experience in their personal lives to manage their personal money. So again, for us, it's meant, what are the core features that we're going to focus on first, where we can deliver the most value, and where we think our members will love the product, and then building out the other features around it over time.
Awesome, thanks for that. I think that's a good insight into kind of what happens during this phase anyway. In terms of the team setup, this is a kind of a slight segue, but did you know how the team was going to be set up before you got into it in earnest, or did you look at some of the discovery and design?
Yeah, I think we had a resource plan in place as to what we wanted the team to be through this phase. Ideally, it would always be great to have 1 or 2 more people to move a bit faster, reduce a few pressure points. What we've found quite transparently is that there's no way to avoid the complexity that's inherent in building a financial services product. So so we've got 50 members on the platform. It's a closed MVP environment that we're operating in. As we transition to full launch, There are a number of regulatory and compliance requirements that are incumbent upon us that we need to adhere to. And then just by the very nature of the platform, as we build out more features, there's a lot of ongoing maintenance and I guess overhead to ensure that tech debt isn't building, that we're replacing some of the early decisions that we've made and remembering why we've decided to do different things. And so there are benefits of having a small, nimble, and very quick moving team, which outweigh, I guess, any like slowdown in progress. But we certainly are feeling the pressure now as we prepare to go full launch in terms of it. There is this feeling across the team that there's a lot happening. And yeah, we moved very quickly. So we were able to develop our invoicing end to end within 2 weeks. So there was a design sprint and then a build sprint. So 2 weeks for each, but 2 weeks for the build. And then as part of that as well, we've actually gone and done some research around what increases the propensity for people to pay when they view an invoice. So how do you structure the information on the invoice to make people pay quicker? And so there's some behavioral science behind that. And I won't go into detail today, but so what we're effectively doing is you're building really quickly, but then you're also trying to fit in innovation along the way so you can continually iterate. And I think that's where the hard part is. It's really easy to set a plan and say, okay, let's go follow that plan. But where it's hard is like if you need to stop and rethink along the way, which you need to do to continue to be effective and iterate, that's where it becomes really difficult when you've got quite limited resources available to you.
Yeah. And there's always that trade-off of, well, we want to build and get it to our, that core community.
Yeah.
And we're going to get feedback. And then what do you do with the feedback? Because you could be perpetually building and getting feedback and building and getting feedback, but you have to look at it and go, right, this is high priority feedback and the rest of it can be done later. It's not urgent before we go to full launch. And especially when you were talking about the trade-offs of team size as well, I think that's a massive thing, especially when you're going through the build right now. For example, if you doubled your team, I think there's a huge misconception that, oh, you double your team, so you should be twice as effective. The percentage increase of effectiveness isn't actually that massive. It's more like 30 to 40% more productive rather than 100% more productive, because your existing really, really experienced resources who have gone through 7, 8, 9 sprints and have delivered all this stuff now have to train some of the new people and go to more meetings, and stand-ups are longer because each person speaks for 2 minutes and there's 5 more people. So it often gets overlooked that having loads and loads of resources is great on one hand, but short term you always take a hit. And if when your delivery timelines are quite tight, it's sometimes better to just pepper in a couple more resources towards the end of the build phase, rather than go hard on resourcing, and then because you might come to a complete slowdown and then have to restart again, and that's difficult as well.
So we've learned some really valuable lessons on that note along the way. And so for me, one of my principles is only spend money where we can deliver value. So I don't want to be spending money unless it's generating value for ultimately our members, but in terms of what we're building. And so, how do you measure that? And if you can't measure it, then you can't really say whether you're doing it or not, and you can't track it. And so what we've been quite disciplined about is managing the output of each of our sprints, so through regular sprint planning and cadence. But what I found is at some point, as we started to add a few more resources to the development team, we were increasing the number of points that we were developing per sprint, but not at the same rate as we were before. So each new developer was not contributing the same number of points. And so what we did was, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, or anyone else that may watch this and have a view on this, but we actually started measuring point per developer per sprint. And then we wanted to attribute as well cost per developer per point, to understand where were we getting benefit from augmenting the team with offshore resources, or actually was it adding burden to the management overhead that would come with working with a dispersed team in multiple different time zones. And what we found was there was sort of an equilibrium where sort of adding too much resource would actually bring down our overall productivity per person. And so we've been pulling those levers and adjusting them over the last couple of sprints, and to get over sort of the heavy development periods of most of the foundations of the app, we did kind of keep a higher resource count, but now we've just adjusted it downwards a little bit as we get closer to full market go live. We've said, actually, you know what, we don't need to, let's reduce speed in exchange for quality, and have our I guess our core engineers focusing on quality rather than managing and producing good work. And so it was a really interesting metric once we started measuring the cadence on a per engineer and per dollar per point produced as well. And so yeah, so that was a really interesting metric. I hadn't looked at it like that before, and I would be keen to hear if you have. But
yeah, I haven't looked at it that way before, but usually, especially when I've worked in teams where they are not part of the, you know, the onshore, the local team, it's more difficult for them anyway, because they're not as connected, they're not as in the loop, so it takes longer for them to, you know, like be aware of something that's happening on the project or things that are on the horizon. So
and I will say, by the way, when I say offshore, most of our team is a remote, geographically dispersed team, so offshore doesn't really do it justice, but effectively engaging external support. But we have been lucky that we've got really high quality engineers that have been working on the project.
Yeah, and it's not even, it's not quality or even the experience. It's like, it's another friction. It's another you know, thing that if you have to get on the phone to someone, or you know, you have to look at your watch and go, oh, I'm a bit late now, I'll have to speak to them tomorrow. That's just another friction. That's a bit of time taken away. So
it increases the feedback loop. And so the more time that goes by, the more opportunity there is for things to be forgotten or misunderstood or mistranslated. And so we've had to be really proactive in managing that. Working remote really requires more communication. You need to over communicate everything. We may have been able to move. There's a constant debate. Could we move faster if we're all co-located? And would the benefits of being co-located outweigh, I guess, this cost of being remote? But for us, we've been really pleased. We've made really strong progress due to the COVID normal that we live in now. It's good for our organization to be founded in a remote way of working. So it means we can always seek to co-locate where possible, but we've managed to work out how to be effective by being geographically dispersed.
Yeah. And again, you've gone back to that point. You know, would you have been more effective if you had, you know, all your resources located in the same place? Well, probably, but then you wouldn't have had as many resources. So would you have got as much done? Maybe not. So it's always
it's also the benefits of operating a remote team means that we've got access to a diverse set of talent and skills from around the world. So the Australian fintech scene is 3 to 5 years behind that of the UK. And our CTO Nathan's located in London. So we still have access to what's happening in the UK and other parts of the world, and whilst building locally for the Australian market.
Yeah. So again, I think we may have covered this already, but what would you say is one of the challenges that you specifically gone through as part of the build phase?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to that trade-off between what in your mind you really want to release versus what you can, due to capacity, are able to release, and then finding a balance kind of in between around, you know, what do your members actually want day one, and that requires you to reach out and consistently engage in a dialogue with your community, and that conceptually seems easy to do, but actually once you're in the middle of build, there's you've got key commercial partners that you need to engage, perform due diligence, sign major contracts. You've got a team that you're building. You've got a product that you're designing and testing. So there's a lot going on. And again, being in a resource constrained environment, particularly in the early stages where we are as our business, the team's done incredibly well to be able to push through that and develop something that's really high quality. But it's certainly a challenge to just keep everything balanced and juggling all the proverbial balls at the same time. So I think that would be the biggest challenge. As I mentioned, because Australia is emerging in terms of its fintech capability, particularly in the space that we're playing in, a lot of the infrastructure is still being built or coming to market. We embarked on a banking as a service partner selection process back in late September last year, and it was actually quite a long process that we went on to find the right partner. And the main reason for that is a lot of the capabilities that we wanted to deploy couldn't be deployed by some of the local partners that were available at the time. And so in the end, I'm pleased to share that we've secured a partnership with Railsbank to go live in the Australian market, which provides us with the ability to issue cards, but also Australian bank accounts as well for our members. And that's different to the model where most have come to market before under sort of like a prepaid cards model. So through our partnership with Railsbank and their bank partner in Australia, but also through a partnership that we've also secured with MasterCard, we'll be able to issue a business debit card day one with a business account as well.
Nice. So on the flip side, a more positive light, what's been something that you've enjoyed the most going through, specifically the build part of Parpera?
Well, what the coolest part about, let's say just from being a founder and seeing something go from, a PowerPoint deck that got rejigged 1,000 times, and then seeing it go from concept through to something that's real and tangible in someone's hands, and seeing the reaction on their face when they use it, and that point of validation when you've built something that actually does help people with something, that's been the most rewarding part for me. We're as I mentioned, very close to our full public launch. We're doing a cool initiative with our community and investor community around sort of our card design and what we bring to market around that. And just being able to embed ourselves in the ecosystem and be part of something that's, you do really feel like you're part of growing something in the Australian market. So that's been really exciting for me and really rewarding, and for the team as well. So again, the key thing is when you get it into the customer's hands, that's the most rewarding part.
Yeah, awesome. And just to close out, if you were going to give someone like a similar fintech founder a bit of advice entering the build part of their fintech journey, what would it be?
It's a really good question. I would say remain focused. You had a plan, and you hopefully perhaps you raised some money based on that plan. Don't deviate from it unless you've got a really good reason to. And so it's really easy to, there's a product roadmap, it's prioritized, there's a long laundry list of things that you want to build, but you can't build it all. And you really need to be focused and prioritize on things that are going to deliver the most value day one. Because they're the things that are going to get you traction and get you to the next stage of your business. And whether that next stage, however you define it, could be next stage of funding, or it could be X number of customers. You really need to find what are those key things that the people that you're going to serve want, and how are you going to then use the resources available to you to deliver that. And I think if you focus on doing that, then you stay focused and engaged, your team is more engaged. So there's a lot of volatility in an early stage business, and the best thing that you can do for your team is to at least protect them from the volatility that you can control. And so I think around managing scope is really important. So my key recommendation would be just remain focused and have conviction in what you're building and stick to it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Thanks for giving up time to chat to me, and good to see you again, and have a great day.
Jazz, thank you so much. And you too. Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Thanks, man.
See you.